entire banking sector. A total of 7 indigenous banks has so far collapsed in the last year, including Unibank, which has today served notice they will take action against the Bank of Ghana. More on that shortly. But first, listen to the second Deputy Speaker of Parliament, Abba Babing, insisting that the current government banking policy is simply wrong.
I happened to get a few minutes with the Minister for Finance, and I was very clear to him that I disagree with the current government policy on the banking sector. The Ghanaian economy is so small to be able to take mega banks. We need small to medium scale banks to be able to mop up the liquidity. We don't have a huge economy. And so to try to raise the minimum capital from 120 million to over 400 million is to give a policy that will be creating mega banks. Since Ghanaians don't have the money, you cannot get that capital in such a small economy. You simply opening up your banks to foreign capture. It meant that we are asking the bankers to go outside Ghana to mobilize the minimum capital. And therefore, foreigners will come to invest in our banks, take control of our banks. And you know, when your banking sector is captured by foreigners, they control your economy. And all of us will be laboring for the banking sector, and the monies will be repatriated outside the frontiers of Ghana. That is a foreign capture. I also indicated to him that these banks are collapsing under bad portfolios because government indulged on huge infrastructural projects, gave these projects to contractors. The contractors had to go to the banks for loans to execute the projects, and government is failing to pay the money to them. And so the contractors cannot repay the loans that they have contracted with the interest. And so the banks are holding huge bad portfolios. And so such things affect the minimum capital of the banks.
What about the governance issues that we've been apprised with, the conduct of some of these directors and shareholders responsible for the collapse of their own banks?
I have not yet laid fingers on actual criminal conduct of those directors. As some say, they met a very bad situation and they tried to save the situation. They were not able to do so because, as I just mentioned, the economy is not growing at the rate that you can mobilize funds from Ghana locally scores. But what do you say about the Bank of Ghana, under whose eyes that this thing happened? What did they do? What didn't they do? The law we passed is clear. But what is even worrying me is that the current government itself is not even obeying the law that we passed, the Bank of Ghana Act.
In what way?
You know, for you to be able to objectively apply yourself to some of these issues, you need to have security of tenure.
Right.
And so when you come and hunt out those who were lawfully appointed and made governor and deputy governor and directors, if you hunt them out and bring your own, it means that you are introducing that insecurity into the tenure of office.
That also compromises the independence of the people that have been appointed.
The independence is clear in the law that the Bank of Ghana should not give sway to any person or group of persons, including government. And so if you are able to come and do that, it's not only that you are compromising the independence, you are also introducing partisanship into the banking sector, particularly at the highest level, the Bank of Ghana. And so that is worrying to many of us. And I think that we need to do so many things to claw back.
You heard the second Deputy Speaker of Parliament, Alban Bagbo. Shortly, we'll listen to the first Deputy Speaker of Parliament, Joe Osowusu, who's also been talking about the banking crisis and backing an in-camera hearing. But today, on the back of what you just heard there, we've also been hearing for the very first time from Unibank. We've this morning been listening to the position expressed by Professor Newman Kojo-Kusi, who is a former board chair of Unibank. And they have indicated tonight that, of course, they've been treated unfairly, and they detail in documents that we'll bring you shortly how they laid out an elaborate plan to inject capital back into Unibank, and that if that had been accepted by the official administrator, would have saved the bank. On the basis of which he says that the Bank of Ghana itself had refused to also give them details of the KPMG report, which may have served as a basis for the decision that the Bank of Ghana took. And he's serving notice today that they reserve the right to take action. Listen.
No, my concern is that the shareholder asked for the details of.
Do you have a specific response to the allegation that 3.7 billion was paid to shareholders, and examples are here given in this disputed report?
I don't have any problem with that, as long as it can be clarified. That we expect proper clarification of how the related companies were determined. I don't have any problem with that.
Right. For instance, some staff of other companies were seconded to Unibank, and Unibank was paying them for a period of 4 years. A number of companies were named in there. Is this the case?
Yes. I hope if Unibank second staff to other companies or related companies, there should be a terms of the secondment. You can't just send somebody from Unibank to go and work at a Accra brewery or so and so. Before that is done, there should be some sort of agreement or the terms of the secondment.
Right.
The KPMG established the terms of the secondment of these staff to the related companies. And if they did, what was it?
Okay, Prof, finally, would these concerns that you have raised about what KPMG has done and what the Bank of Ghana has done, would the shareholder be taking any action? Would you be deciding to go to the bank, to go to court, I mean?
Of course, the shareholder will have to take action.
Okay.
The shareholder will have to take action. You have to.
What action? What action is he taking?
If nothing at all, there has been a report prepared by an official administrator on his assets, his bank.
Yeah, so
as a result
so which action is he taking, sir?
Let me finish. As a result of the report, the bank has collapsed. So if you were the shareholder, would you sit down quietly and fold your arms?
So what action is he taking, Prof? What action would he take?
That's one I can't tell you what action I'm taking, but what I'm sure that an action will be taken.
So that is the former board chair of Unibank, Professor Newman Kojo-Kusi, there, raising a series of concerns with the way the Bank of Ghana has treated them. And in fact, there are several documents in our possession that detail some of the concerns that Unibank over the last 7 months have raised with both the KPMG and the Bank of Ghana, detailing some of the key issues that Newman Kusi was just talking about there. And my colleague Joseph Gako joins me with details of some of these documents that had gone back and forth between Unibank and the Bank of Ghana and also to KPMG. Let's start with this one. And this one was signed by Mr. Newman Kusi himself and was copied to His Excellency the President, Dr. the Vice President, Dr. Baumia, the Office of the President as well, Honorable Kandapa, Minister for National Security, Dr. Ernest Addison, Governor, Bank of Ghana, Maxwell Poku-Afari, the First Deputy Governor, Bank of Ghana, Dr. Benjamin Amwa, Head of Research, Bank of Ghana, Mrs. Peggy Osei Tutu, who's the Head of Banking, the Bank of Ghana, and a host of others. And this was a letter written from Unibank to the Head of Banking Supervision Department of the Bank of Ghana, and it dated 18th January 2018. What does it say?
So they were raising concerns about how they say were unconventional examinations involving monthly auditing and downgrading of some of Unibank's credit facilities. And so they listed out about 5 different auditing that had been done by the Bank of Ghana, when they say the law requires that only one such auditing should be done within a year. So a portion of the letter makes the point that this unconventional treatment has taken the form of monthly auditing and downgrading of facilities which had already been provided for during the 2017 annual on-site examinations. And then they go on to list the examinations that were done and the results that came out, making the point that you would recall that between the 15th of May and the 21st of June 2017, the Banking Supervision Department of the Bank of Ghana conducted the on-site examinations of Unibank, and they went on to make the point that the reported capital adequate ratio of Unibank was previously 10.7%, but then they reduced it to 8.2% following the downgrade, and that the total capital of Unibank again stood at 422 million, which again was downgraded over a period of time.
Now, they make the point that whilst Unibank was waiting for the complete examination report, and what they laid out before this paragraph was what the interim report said. Whilst they were waiting for the complete examination report, another team of inspectors then visited the Unibank to audit and downgrade the same credit facilities on which the provisions had been made during the just ended on-site examination, and the results of which were dispatched on 15th August, when the capital adequacy ratio was reduced from 10.7 to 8.24. Now, then between 15th August and then the end of August, further auditing and downgrading were conducted on these same accounts, and these reduced the capital adequacy ratio from 8.24% to 4.80%. Now, this means that in the month of August alone, the capital adequacy was reduced twice. First from 10.7 to 8.2, and then second from 8.2 to 4.8.
And then there was another auditing that was done in the month of September. Now, Unibank says they were organizing their own team to look at the report that had come out of this August auditing. And then just around that same time, the new auditing was done, and the accounts were downgraded again. And the result was that the paid-up capital that Unibank had reduced from 422 million cedis to 153 million cedis.
Okay, and for the first time, Unibank then began to make a loss because of the downgrading. Now, this is what they say to that point. It says, point 5, it is crucial at this stage to draw your attention to the fact that Unibank had not been a loss-making institution until the Banking Supervision Department began their inexplicable on-site monthly auditing and downgrading of the same credit facilities.
And then they make the point quoting previous practices by the Bank of Ghana and say that it's common knowledge that when it comes to these on-site examinations, it's supposed to be conducted once a year. But then in the case of Unibank, additional on-site examinations were conducted on the 15th August, as you rightly mentioned. And then 3 additional such on-site visits and examinations were done. And they say all these visits were done and Unibank was downgraded.
So we're spent on auditing and downgrading the same accounts on where the earlier on-site examination had been made.
And then they make the point that in effect, what it means is that since August, and this letter was being written in January, so between August the year before and January 18, these same accounts had been downgraded 4 times, and the unfortunate aspect of that is the downgrading included government and quasi-government exposures to Unibank.
And we had reported earlier that the Bank of Ghana, the government of Ghana at this point, and this is a KPMG letter that was written to the Finance Ministry, owed the Bank of Ghana, owed Unibank close to 1 billion cedis, which is what they are talking about here. Now, it goes on to state that it would also be relevant to point out that the activities from 15th August to date were all outside the examination plan for 2017. These off-examination plan for 2017 activities of the Banking Supervision Department sent wrong signals to the market and began to undermine the public confidence in Unibank. Therefore, since 15th August 2017, the bank has been working under extremely strained conditions. It has become even more difficult as the government has not been able to settle or pay the already validated interim payment of certificates worth over 800 million cedis to Unibank to improve its liquidity. And it says it is a fact that the central bank has been providing liquidity support to these difficult circumstances, against Unibank's own 220 million security in the form of treasury bills. Thus, if the 800 million hearing certificates were to be paid, the gap between the central bank liquidity support and the Unibank security would narrow significantly. And it says, unfortunately, government has also not affected these payments.
And then they make the point that this is a bank that had been doing well. They say the story of Unibank needs to be told. It's the story of an indigenous bank which had the highest paid up capital in the industry, with their capital adequacy ratio standing somewhere in the region of 10.7% in July 2017. And that the Unibank story is again a story of a bank that had featured twice as Ghana's most prestigious enterprise in both 2015 and 2016 when it comes to the Ghana Club 100 Awards, and yet has been weakened in just 3 months through inexplicable auditing and downgrading of the same credit facilities, including government and quasi-government exposures by the Banking Supervision Department of the Central Bank.
Now, they then point to further what they call unfair treatment, and it says now the Banking Supervision Department has given shareholders a deadline to inject the required capital. It says this is indeed unfortunate. Is the BSD's activities backed by a new banking law, or Unibank has just been singled out for this unfair treatment? Have any other banks been subjected to similar treatment, or is this a plan reserved solely for Unibank? Now, they talk about the shareholders injecting capital. We have another document in which Unibank shareholders write to the official administrator, KPMG. This is on the 12th of July. Remember that the Unibank was dissolved together with other 4 banks in August.
Yes, on the 1st of August.
On the 1st of August.
Bank of Ghana
and on 12th of July, they wrote this letter to the official administrator. What did they say?
So they make the point that they refer to a previous letter that had been written by KPMG and earlier correspondence to them, and made the point that they would want to reaffirm their commitment to injecting more funds into the bank to address the solvency and liquidity issues, and that they were also ready to progress with discussions on the appropriate structure to handle and leverage the assets of the bank, which had been registered in the name of Hoda, which is the property company that are managing some of the assets.
Now, they then go ahead in this letter to then provide some evidence to back their commitment to inject capital. They say that we are at an advanced stages of our funding arrangements and fund injection into the bank in accordance with our generally proposed timelines as follows. We attach the evidence of the first tranche amount of $200 million United States dollars to be received this July 2018. But that's not all they insist they were ready to provide.
So they make the point that the shareholders remain committed to inject another tranche of 1 billion Ghana cedis by the end of September 2018, which is actually next month, and that evidence of that would also be provided in the course of the year to the Bank of Ghana. And then they say that as per the shareholders letter that had been dated the 10th of April to the Bank of Ghana, the Bellstar Consortium still maintains its commitment to offload all of its shares in ADB Bank and invest the proceeds in Unibank, and that would have brought in an additional 700 million Ghana cedis into the account of Unibank.
Now, they also indicate that they had assets. So it says, as indicated in our letter dated 22nd June 2018, Unibank retains the beneficial ownership of the bank's assets registered in the name of Hoda Properties. It is our view that these assets, together with shareholders' assets totaling 4.4 billion, shall be warehoused in a trust to be held for the bank and appropriately leveraged to raise and inject funding into the bank. And so that's Unibank, they're indicating its readiness in July, somewhere mid-July, that they are ready to put in capital to save the bank. But then, of course, in August, we know what happened. Government, I think it was the 1st of August.
Exactly on the 1st of August.
Government came in and decided. In fact, and that's the major concern that they raised in another letter, that it appears that KPMG's report that formed the basis for the government liquidation of the bank ignored these, these offers and the roadmap they had put forward to save the bank.
And so, and with this particular letter, note the timelines. The bank was eventually taken over by the Bank of Ghana on 1st August 2018. This latest letter from the shareholders of Unibank, signed by Dr. Kwabena Dufour himself as a shareholder, was actually dated on the 31st of July 2018, just a day, before the Bank of Ghana took over. And it comes under the heading, Concerns of Shareholders of Unibank Raised at Meetings with Officials. And so they said, they made reference to a meeting that they had held a day before they wrote this letter to the Bank of Ghana on the June ending financial report of Unibank to the Bank of Ghana and subsequent meetings. And they made the point that they would want to formally reiterate the concerns that they had raised in those meetings about how they considered as grossly inappropriate and very worrying activities.
And they explain further. It says the official administrator, this is the KPMG, has impaired the entire loan book of over 4 billion as of June 2018. This includes government and quasi-government receivables of close to 1 billion Ghana cedi, which we've talked about. Now, the most important part, it says assets provided by shareholders valued at 4.4 billion with a forced sale value of about 3.52 billion to be liquidated or leveraged for injecting liquidity was totally ignored in the June 30th financial position of the bank. In other words, the report that KPMG produced in June, by that time they had made these offers to liquidate the assets, etc., and inject the monies back into Unibank, so Unibank will not collapse. They are insisted in this letter. This is the day before they were liquidated, in fact, and made part of the consolidated bank. That report to the Bank of Ghana totally ignored their offers. The offers they've made to re-inject capital as shareholders into the bank. And it says that, in fact, they even quote the Bank of Ghana's guidelines to support this, and that the guideline for the financial publication of banks allow the forced sale of such assets to be treated as assets held for sale. It said the shareholders presented these assets on the 10th April 2018 and has since been engaging with the official administrator on the process of perfecting the inclusion of these assets to support the balance sheet. It says we are surprised that the official administrator ignored these assets without recourse to the shareholders simply on the basis that they did not have sufficient time to do so.
So let me jump the other paragraphs, including the demand that I made on the shareholders, and move to another critical point having to do with liquidity, which is the second to last paragraph of the letter. And they say, as at the 30th of June 2018, the bank's unsecured Bank of Ghana borrowing or liquidity support stood at 2.38 billion Ghana cedis, with secured borrowing standing at 0.652 billion Ghana cedis from the Bank of Ghana. And so of the 2.8 billion, they say that government and its affiliated agencies owed the Bank of Ghana an amount of 0.68 billion, giving rise to a nominal liquidity gap of 1.36 billion cedi. So they are making the point that with the 2.3 billion cedi, which was actually the liquidity support, a large chunk of that was actually money that government owed them. And that when you take out that from the total 2.3, then there was just the gap of 1.36 billion cedis that they needed to bridge.
Okay, Joseph, thank you very much. And if you go on my journal, you see a story that again shareholders have written another letter in which they now raise conflict of interest situation on the part of KPMG, which was the official administrator, in which they say that the recent appointment of KPMG as a receiver in respect of some assets of Unibank and 4 other banks shows KPMG seeking to benefit from the report that it provided to the Bank of Ghana through a further paid engagement, a clear conflict of interest situation which does not put KPMG in a good light. In other words, KPMG was the official administrator. Its report led to the collapse of the bank, which then became part of the consolidated bank. Now, KPMG has then now been appointed as a receiver in the consolidated bank, which the shareholders are now complaining about. Well, also speaking today on these issues is the first Deputy Speaker of Parliament, that's Joe Owusu. You recall that the Parliament itself, and Joseph, this is something that Parliament will be doing shortly, which is the hearings into the crisis. Yes. We don't know when exactly.
We know it's on the 5th, the 6th, and the 7th of September when they are expected to hold an in-camera sitting and interrogate officials of the Bank of Ghana, officials of the Finance Ministry and other persons associated with the bank.
Would that be based on an emergency recall Parliament? Because Parliament will not be back by then.
So Parliament is coming back on the 10th of September for that emergency recall, which is the week after. So they spend the Wednesday, the Thursday, and the Friday looking into the issue, and then Parliament itself will begin sitting the Tuesday that follows. Okay. Now listen to Joe Sowusu, who is the first Deputy Speaker of Parliament, making the point that these 3 days of sitting should be held in camera.
Actually, well, I fully support the Finance Committee. I think that they should take a lot more time, try to understand what has happened, and look at the bigger picture, look into the future. Whatever we do now, there will be repercussions in the future. So we should not be carried away by the sentiments of today. We should be looking in 10, 15 years' time, what do we expect? So whatever we do now, but it is important that Ghanaians must know. What I'm worried about is the misuse of the media. The media is extremely powerful, but sometimes we don't look beyond what we can get today. We don't look too long into the future. And so I want them to sit in camera.
In camera?
Yes. And
the people are interested.
Why not?
And some people have said if there are regular updates for everybody to know what is happening, then the speculations will be less.
The committee can always give information out. This is not about any specific persons or political office holders, but the business of the country, the banking finance sector of the country is so critical that we should be very careful what we expose to the rest of the world, not just Ghanaians here. The competitors we have. And remember, these are practically the Ghanaian-owned banks. Unibank was one of the biggest Ghanaian-owned banks, and it's so disappointing what it has turned out to be. But we should be careful. We should learn for the future. We should not just be doing the fanfare part of it.
Well, Parliament's findings, how would it help resolve the entire issue?
No. I think, first, the Bank of Ghana is self-regulatory. But it is important that the body outside the Bank of Ghana goes into how they are regulating themselves and the other banks. Because many people think that these things shouldn't have happened and haven't gone as far as they went. So how did it so happen? We need to know what is failing in the Bank of Ghana itself. And then how did the banks get that so much space to do what they want when there's a banking supervision department? I mean, what are the auditors are reporting on those banks? Were they reporting and we Ghanaians were not taking them seriously, or we're not reading them? I have a newspaper which I'm angry with because I'm exposed badly to one of the banks. A friend warned me, but I was reading the newspaper. And the people was giving the assurances that, oh, this bank is cool, this bank is cool. So I was disregarding my friends who were in the industry. Now I'm badly exposed. So what role are those people playing? Yeah. Today I've seen that they have published that another bank has met this. They published that about one of the banks that collapsed 6-8 months ago. Within 3 months after that, the bank collapsed. I'm not the only one who is exposed. I know some who are a lot more exposed than I am. I'm a public servant.
But they say deposits are safe, essentially.
Deposits are deposits. Investments are a different matter. You pile it up small, and keep it somewhere. It's something you're hoping to retire on quietly. It takes time to pile them up and put them somewhere,
And that is the first Deputy Speaker of Parliament, Joe Sowusu. News Night starts right now and coming up in the next 60 minutes. And